Hi guys, welcome to Thursday Night Roleplay. Tonight I'm going to be discussing elves and how they work with the various classes. First I'm just going to go through a bit of basic stuff about elves without trying to sound hateful or resentful. No, it's fine. I really prefer dwarves over elves. I've always found them to be a bit pretentious, but then again, I think they're meant to be. They're meant to be the pretty, beautiful people. One thing that's really worth knowing about elves is they live for at least 700 years, potentially up to 1,000. So their perspective on life is different to that of a lot of the other more short-lived species, really depending on which world set you're playing in. The only species really that outlives them that's in the PHB would be gnomes, who in theory can live to 900 years, where elves live to well over 700. But having a 1,000-year-old elf and having a 1,000-year-old gnome isn't impossible. And again, that depends on which world you're using. Some worlds don't give gnomes as much cool stuff. There are lots of types of elves. Again, like dwarves, they're one of the oldest classes. They've been around since Red Book. And as such, they're also one of the most adaptable. Probably short of humans, elves and dwarves are the most adaptable because they're the oldest races. In terms of rules, elves get a +2 on their dexterity score. Their alignment, elves tend to be freedom loving, so they tend to be chaotic, but really they're also understanding, so they tend to be lawful, which is the great thing about them. They have a dichotomy. You can play an elf that's an elder elf and very lawful. You can play a young elf that's exceptionally chaotic. Or you can just play it so that something that's 700 years old plays to a set of laws that mean nothing to you. Size-wise, they vary with the different species of elves, so dark elves being smaller, normal elves being about the same height as humans, not too different. Base speed is 30. Elves have dark vision, not the same as night vision, but quite good. They have keen senses, so they have proficiency in the perception skill, which is nice. And they get advantage in saving throws against being charmed, which is also cool. In addition to that, elves get trance, which means they get to use 4 hours for a long rest. Well, they get the benefit that humans get from 8 hours sleep, which is basically a long rest. Languages, pretty much anything, including Elven. Now, they then break down into 3 subspecies. First being the High Elf. The High Elves are very much your Lothlorien, Lord of the Rings style elves. You're very pretty, for some reason all blonde and very tall elves. Rules-wise, their intelligence increases by 1, and their proficiency with a long sword, short bow, and longbow. I want to apologise, my Tourette's is acting up quite badly tonight, so if it goes funky, sorry about that. They know 1 cantrip because they're innately magical, which is cool. They get an extra language, which, yeah, whatever. Next, you've got Wood Elves with a wisdom increase of 1. Elf weapon training, their proficiency in long sword, short bow, and longbow. They have fleet of foot. Their base walking speed is 35 feet, so they get places faster. And Mask of the Wild, they can attempt to hide even if they're lightly obscured or just in mist, which again is cool. And finally, the ultimate in Edgelord, we have Dark Elves. Oh, sorry, I forgot to say what Wood Elves are. Wood Elves are again, you can find Wood Elves in the Ring, They're your Mirkwood Rangers and the like. They're a lot more down to earth than elves, although they are still very sort of alien in nature because of their long livedness. Wood elves tend to be more tolerable of humans just because wood elves are used to dealing with dumb animals, I guess. And then you've got the dark elves for the drow, who are traditionally the evil elf. They're the elves that were banished underground and worship Loth, the Spider Queen. However, there are a lot of people out there who play misunderstood dark elves who are just trying to fit in and whatever. Like I say, edgelords. If you want to mope and be mysterious, dark elves are really the way to go. If any of you are familiar with Angel from the Buffy series, if you're playing him in D&D, he'd be a typical dark elf character. That's just my opinion. Some people like them. Actually, I like them as well. It's just I do acknowledge they get played quite a lot for dramatic effect. Your ability score increases by 1. You have superior dark vision, which means you can see in the night up to 100 feet, which is what happens when you're a race that evolves underground. You have sunlight sensitivity. You're at disadvantage on attack rolls and wisdom rolls perception checks that rely on sight when the target of your attack, the target of your attack or whatever you're trying to perceive is in direct sunlight. Again, they work better in the dark. That doesn't mean they're not useful in daylight, but it means they're going to try and do most of their stuff at dusk or dawn or at night. Drow magic. You know the dancing lights cantrip. When you reach 3rd level, you can cast Fairy Fire. Once with this trait and regain the ability to do so when you finish a long rest. When you reach 5th level, you can cast a darkness spell. Once with this trait and regain the ability to do so when you finish a long rest. Having these abilities used to be what gave drows what's known as an ECL, or an effective class level, because they had a slight bump. It doesn't really do it in 5th level. It just drags out getting these abilities over more levels. They're good, but they're not game changing. They can be useful in the hands of a clever player. It's difficult to abuse them provided your DM knows what they are intimately. And if you are DMing a drow character, make sure you know what these spells are, because your drow players will try and do all kinds of shit with fairy lights. Remember what it can and can't do. Drow training proficiency. You have proficiency with rapiers, short swords, and hand crossbows. They're slightly different. They're slightly edgier. And being the lightest and the smallest of the elves, they tend towards more finesse-based weaponry. It's worth noting with the drow, because they're based on the spider. Well, not because they're based on the spiders, but similarly to the spiders they're based on, the society is dominated by females, and the females are the bigger, the stronger. Drow males tend towards being wizards rather than warriors, though there are plenty of drow male warriors. Drow females tend towards being clerics or warriors, the majority of the drow armies being made up of the physically bigger and stronger females, because they're bigger and stronger. If any of you are wondering what it's like to have Tourette's, it's fun. It's the funnest thing you could ever do. There are worse things. Now, let's look at the elven races versus the different classes that they could play. The barbarian. Barbarians work perfectly with elves. Barbarians work well with pretty much anyone, to be honest with it. Because of their love of freedom and their often ability to roam, high elves will make a fine barbarian. Wood elves, pretty much, short of the ranger class, the barbarian class is possibly the best class, the second best class, yeah. It's possibly the second best class for wood elves, with the ranger class being the better one in terms of background-wise. They don't tend to interact much with society. They tend to go their own way and do their own thing. That's very much barbarian. They tend to they tend to live a more primitive and in line with nature life. And again, that's very much part of the barbarian attack. Drow barbarians. Drow are traditionally more citified, but they do have rangers. They do have out there groups, so who live in small pockets in the Underdark. So Drow barbarians not impossible. As I say, it's less likely than either of the other groups, as they tend to stick together in much more coherent, succinct groups and colonies. But again, it's far from impossible. Or another way to play is if you're playing an individual Drow that's gone away from Drow society, you could easily adopt barbarian tactics. In terms of how well they work, there's nothing particularly to prevent them working with it. With barbarians, there's nothing to lend it to them. There's nothing that makes them tougher or stronger, or gives them extra hit points, which is what barbarians really love. But there's nothing that gives them a disadvantage. They have no negatives that say, a barbarian might be risky for you. In terms of rage, the aggressive things, it depends what pisses your elf off and how you want to play that rage. Yeah, none of the barbarian abilities particularly work for or against it. You got your primal path, which is about your rage, which is about your being sort of very brutal. You got your path of the you got your primal path, so you got your path of the berserker, which is about your rage and your abuse, and you can do that easily. The path of the totem warrior could lend itself very well to could lend itself amazingly to a wood elf. They love their animals. The path of the totem warrior could lend itself amazingly to a drow as well. You just need to look at altering it to underdark beasts. You've got the bear, the eagle, and the wolf, but there's no reason why you can't call them by other names. Like the spider, the serpent, and the mimic. I don't know, whatever you want, and just use the rules as counts as your drow barbarian doesn't follow the bear, the eagle, wolf because they're more alien to him. He rather follows, an underdark creature, which is very similar. Or you could have it that now that he's in the overworld, he's trying to adapt and he's using those as ways to adapt. In terms of survival. Next, we've got the bard. Obviously, your additional charisma that you get from the dark elf. I was right with dark elf, wasn't it? Means they'd be an excellent bard. The additional dexterity and wisdom don't really do much. In terms of abilities, the wanderlust you get from wood elves makes her a perfect wandering bard. The longevity and often the love of the past, and just because they've been there and having these long memories for a high elf makes her an excellent bard. There's nothing stopping you being a drow bard. Nothing particularly lends itself character-wise for drows to be bard, but drows must have music the same as others, the same as everybody else. So there's nothing that is against you being a drow bard. And as I say, that extra charisma will work very well in powering the bard magic. So where are we? Yeah. Empowering the bard's abilities, because they're all based on charisma. Oh yeah, there you go. The pre-known abilities for bards aren't really going to cross over with the pre-known abilities for elves that much, and you always have alternatives, so you can pick other abilities. You don't need to lock down. You've got, for example, weapons. You've got simple weapons, hand crossbows, longsword and rapiers. The same as a drow, but it's not going to really make a difference because there's a wide between the two of those. there's already a wide variety of weaponries there. Where are we? Saving throws, dexterity and charisma. Again, you've got your dex buffs and your charisma buffs in 2 of your types of elves, making your saving throws quite good. Your bard skills is choose any 3, so you're not going to cross over with any skills that an elf might have. Yeah, they'll work well with them. Elven clerics, again, clerics is one of the oldest classes, so it pretty much works with anything. The additional wisdom of the wood elves means that they're particularly effective rather as clerics, because it gives them that extra point of wisdom, making their spellcasting stat more effective. Drows have female clerics up the yin yang, so playing a female cleric of Loth is perfectly fine. If you're playing a drow going against type being a good guy, it's perfectly acceptable to have a religious conversion be the reason that he's not being an evil drow anymore. He's not following Loth, but he's rather following Mystara or Helm or someone else because he feels that pull, and that's why he's not with the drow. So background-wise, clerics and drow work fantastically in either direction. Background-wise, again, there's no particular reason for wood elves to go for clerics, but there's no reason they wouldn't. And whilst they're often totemic, there is a nature god, and it's perfectly acceptable for a wood elf to worship the nature god. In fact, I think the nature god in Faerun may well be a wood elf god. In terms of the high elves, again, they've lived for ages. They've worked with the gods for ages. There's literally no reason why a high elf wouldn't be a cleric. There's not much to push it towards being a cleric, but there you go. You can't have everything, but there's nothing pushing it away from clerics. So high elves are often renowned for their dislike of the corruption of the world. So again, the anti-undead ideology behind many clerics could be particularly appealing to a high elf. You may notice I'm going a little bit faster than I did last time. Part of that is because I'm more passionate about dwarves now, about elves, I'll be honest. But part of that is because the other one took a little longer than I intended. You've got a ton of domains, so none of those domains are going to be problems for a cleric. Druid. Druids fit perfectly into wood elves. Barbarian, Druid and Ranger are probably the ones that really call to wood elf players. Most wood elf players are the kind of guys who play a character who is a loner or is a one with nature, and these character classes are the loner character classes. Your Druid doesn't require followers like a cleric. He isn't there to spread the word of his god like a cleric. He's there to take care of his nature. He's there to take care of the world around him. And again, wood elves already are very inclined to do this and have a great tendency towards doing this over pretty much anything else. High elves being druids is totally a thing. Most of the traditional ideologies outside of D&D of these white robe wearing spiritual ritualists that go towards the druid ideology in the real world would really match up with the high elf ideology. A lot of people I know who are druids love high elves because of the similarity between the ideologies of fictional high elves and real world druids. So they work really well. Drow, again, there's nothing to recommend a drow being a druid. There's nothing particularly to stop him being a druid either. Again, druids being one of the older classes tend to flow a bit more. In terms of proficiencies, you've got a few extra weapons proficiencies. Your saving throws are intelligence and wisdom. So again, the wood elves get a buff on intelligence. Wood elves get a buff on wisdom. The two of those meaning that wood elves, rules-wise, really excel at being druids. Again, these buffs aren't a lot. and they're not going to say, oh, if you want to be a druid, be this. But if you are min-maxing or you are looking to make a character who is optimized, they do add a little bit more, and every little bit will make your character that little bit more powerful. If that's how you want to run your characters. As I say, there's nothing wrong with min-maxing, there's nothing wrong with optimizing. As a DM, I always recommend play fun first. Find something you'll enjoy playing, then worry about optimizing it so that it works the best. If all you're worrying about is how powerful your character is going to be and the next cool thing you're going to get at the next level, you may find yourself missing a lot of fun in the game. And you may find yourself potentially not having as much fun as other people and possibly even slowing their fun down. Oh, sorry. There's my EDC, sorry. Elf traits are dexterity. It's high elves that get intelligence, yeah. So, rephrase that, EDC, sorry. With your saving throws being intelligence and wisdom, both high elves and wood elves are going to have an advantage on saving throws. Your spell casting stat is wisdom though. So, like I say, your wood elves, it's literally a picture of a wood elf there. Actually, I think that might be a moon elf. For those wondering if it's a drow, no, it's not. Drows have black skin and white hair. There are moon elves and grey elves and all kinds of weird other elves, because elves have been around for so long they've developed dozens of subspecies, but don't worry about it. In this book, you've got 3 elves to choose from. If you then want to look into the subspecies, there is plenty of homebrew stuff. There's loads of stuff in old editions of D&D that isn't that hard to convert. But the main species of elves are fairly solid anyway. You get, let's have a look, yeah. You get animal companions. They're more going to fit with overworld species than underdark species until you get to the higher levels, because at the lower levels of animal companions, they can do very little. They're just nice, having, and as you get higher levels, you get ones that can fly, ones that can do poison, ones that can swim. As the levels increase, that's, more stuff that you do. You can assume the shape of a beast, which again is nice, and the higher levels make it more powerful. It's worth noting for any DMs out there, figure out what the beasts can do and have a good hard think about anything that your player wants, because again, dark elf players and elf players in general tend to be cleverer players, or tend to think they're clever players at least, and they tend to try and be smart asses. Apologies to dark elf players out there. I've just DM'd and played with a lot of you. Your dark elf player should have something that suits him as a dark elf as well. So you've got to think, if he's a druid, if he's a dark elf, and he wants his animal form to be something like a spider, how's that going to work? How are you going to let that happen? And how at the same time you're going to limit it so that it's no more powerful than your basic animal form of a wolf, or something like that. Up to the 2nd level, you've got no flying or swimming speed, example wolf. Up to 4th level, no flying, example crocodile. Up to 8th level, giant eagle. If your drow wants to, for example, have a giant spider or a wolf spider form, you can't say, oh yeah, but you can climb up walls, because that gives them that gives them a significant advantage and a significant buff. So keeping it in line with the role playing whilst maintaining a solid ideology of rules and balance is worth considering. As a matter of fact, it's worth considering with any player using any animal form. Animal form can be a lot more powerful than it's intended to be if you're not careful. Sorry for insulting drow players there. I didn't mean to. Yes, I did. I hate you all. No, I didn't. It's high elf players, the smell. All elf players, no. Kidding. Or am I? No. Yes, no. The fighter species? The fighter class, all elves work well as fighters. Drow with their increased wisdom, Drow tend to be dexterity fighters because of their size, but there's nothing rules-wise that actually locks you into it. Their charisma ability increase doesn't affect it, so you're okay there. High elves with their intelligence increase is amazing. Why do I need dexterity increase? Does my brain stop working? Oh yeah, basic elves do dexterity. This has been recorded late at night and after a really busy shift at work, so again, apologies if I'm rambling. Yeah, your dexterity abilities does lend itself towards being a more dexterity based fighter, because you do get a +2 on dex, but you don't have to go that way if you don't want to. Just hitting people with a longsword's fine. The idea, wood elves tend to, again, be protectors of the realm. They're often fighting animals, often protecting nature. Drow are very militaristic anyway, so the idea of a soldier is great there. The idea of a high elf that spent hundreds of years perfecting his skill with a sword, again, lends to a very impressive background fighter. Rules-wise, there's nothing that pushes you forwards or away from fighters. Monks, again, all three classes work well with monks. There's no reason why any particular class wouldn't be a monk. High elves are drawn to introspection. Wood elves are drawn to solitude and staying out away from civilization. And again, the drow have a very organized matriarchal religious system. So I'm sure whilst there are a lot of female clerics, there are also a lot of drow monks and monkesses, nuns out there, so that's not a problem. In terms of weapons, simple weapons and short swords, it's stuff you've already mostly got access to as an elf, but you have a wide variety anyway. Saving throws, strength and dexterity. The dexterity locks in with the fact that you get a dexterity boost as an elf, so that will help. Skills, choose from acrobatics, athletics, insight, religion and stealth. None of those are a problem. They're all cool, and the stealth will probably work well with the high level of dexterity with elves, and particularly darker drow once you start getting those abilities, and once you get the darkness spell, that's going to play quite well. Yeah. There's not much else that really pushes, and there's not much else that goes against, but with the exception, obviously, of martial arts, you can use dex instead of combat. So again, elves lend themselves very well to being monks rules-wise, because again, you've got the strength and dex saving throws, and the martial art allowing you to use your dex instead of your strength means that you're using a skill where you've got a plus buff in. Yeah, you've got a +2 buff in, which is nothing to be sneered at. And amongst dexterity is going to allow you to use that repeatedly and regularly. Paladins. Frankly, paladins are awesome. They use charisma as their spellcasting stat, so straight away you can see that. Straight away you can see that drow paladins have a cool advantage there. There's nothing against either of the others playing it. I always think a high elf character-wise is more likely to play a paladin than a wood elf. A drow, character-wise, again, they have a very strong religious component in their background, so they're quite likely to, there's an easy way to steer them straight towards paladin status. Just not necessarily of a god you like. Abilities, weapons, simple weapons and martial weapons, you get extra weaponry there. Skills, athletic, insight, intimidation, medicine, persuasion and religion. Nice widespread skills work with all your buffs and abilities. Yeah, and as I say, your magic works off charisma. So an evil dark elf paladin is having all the fun there. Remember, paladins are much freer in this edition. They don't have to be this pure good guy. You can make paladins more in line with what your god is, and you have your different oaths. You know, so you got your where are we? Sacred oath. You got your oath of devotion. Why am I missing a page? I keep flipping over 2 pages, so I can't read things. You got your oath of devotion, your oath of the ancients, and your oath of vengeance. Your oath of the ancients, possibly one that high elves and wood elves will lean towards. The oath of devotion, again, both high elves and wood elves are likely to lean towards that. The oath of vengeance, anyone can take, but that sounds more like an edgy drow thing to me. Please feel free to disagree with me. Half the stuff that comes out of my mouth is bullshit. Tourette's. Ranger, literally a wood elf. Rangers are literally what wood elves are. Rangers and wood elves, very much the same thing. If you want to double down on that wood elfy goodness, pick a ranger. You can have high elf rangers. You can totally have drow rangers. Drow spend a lot of the time in those tunnels hunting and capturing and enslaving. The idea of a drow ranger, background wise, works very, very well. But yeah, higher wood elves and rangers are yeah, everything you imagine a wood elf to be is pretty much everything you imagine a ranger to be. Sorry, just taking control of my face for a second there. Where's your spell casting? Wisdom. Again, that gives you a wood elf. That gives your wood elves an advantage. Once you get the spell casting, your armor, light armor, medium armor, shield, simple weapons, martial weapons. Again, not much extra there, but you already have a wide spread of weapons as an elf. Saving throws, strength and dex. Your wood elf already has, an elf already has dex, so that plays in there very well. Skills, animal handling, athletics, insight, investigation, nature, perception, stealth and survival. That again, that's a great elf. Great elf. That's a great spread that goes well with wood elf's abilities. Yeah, your ranger archetypes. All work with wood elves. Every single one works well with wood elves. And none of them work particularly badly with either of the other elves. Every elf hunts to defend his kingdom. Drow hunt regularly. Beastmasters. Drow use all kinds of animals and weird things. You just want to look at what different things you could use to be more drowish, maybe. And again, with a DM, where with a drow, you often might want to lean to flip it so it makes more sense for a drow coming from the Underdark to be familiar with these creatures. Do check what abilities these creatures have, because you can end up inadvertently giving your player something way more powerful than you intended. I don't know why the inverted commas, they did it by themselves. Rogue. Rogues rely on dexterity and they have a shit ton of skills. So again, elves go as rogues. Drows, being inclined towards stealth and darkness, go as rogues. Again, drow picture there. There are several kinds of rogues going on. There is the pickpocket rogue as an elf with high dexterity. Any kind of elf works for that. There is the charming, swashbuckling rogue. And again, drows with their extra charisma work with that. So yeah, any kind of elf works. So there's no reason to not play any kind of elf as a drow, any kind of elf as a rogue. But drows particularly work at it both because of their character background and because of their rules. Wood elves are far more likely to have a fuzzy sense of what's yours and mine. High elves, I don't see a reason why they wouldn't nick stuff. Sorcerers, again, sorcerers, their magic ability is intelligence, so wood elf sorcerers work really well. There are several sorcerers' origins. Wild magic works amazingly with a wood elf. Fey ancestry, if you want to. You've got draconic ancestry and wild magic. As sorcerers' origins, but elves are already considered naturally magical, so there's no reason you couldn't pick either. And elves have a long relationship with dragons, so there's no reason you couldn't pick either. Wild magic, as I say, works exceptionally well with wood elves, and drow. Again, there's no reason you couldn't pick either. Sorry, going really quickly. I'm aware how long this video is going. Warlocks. Warlocks make deals with other creatures. Sorry, I'm a bit warm. Warlocks fundamentally make deals with other creatures. Elves are almost otherworldly in themselves, so a high elf making a deal with an archfey is perfectly understandable. A dark elf making a deal with an old one is perfectly understandable. And even a wood elf making a deal with an old one or an archfey, that fits right into their background without much effort. And again, all this stuff I'm suggesting is just things that seem to fit and flow easily. You can, none of them, they're not an exclusive or complete list of how these characters fit together. You can play two type, you can play against type. I'm just looking at how these characters naturally flow together. Where are we? Your saving throws are wisdom and charisma, meaning again your wood elves and your dark elves both are going to work very well there rules wise. Armor light, weapons simple, meaning you've got a few extra weapons to pull up your sleeve than standard. Deception, your skills are Arcana, Deception, History, Intimidation, Investigation, Nature and Religion. Quite a wide section of skills there, so they'll work quite well for you and with whatever skill sets. By the way, when I say that, I mean some of them are intelligence, some of them are charisma, some of them are wisdom. So your buffs in skill will add and work with them quite well. Sorry. Where are we? No. I am looking for spellcasting ability charisma. So again, that works with dark elves. You can literally just see a dark elf making some seedy deal with a demon or an otherworldly god for more power. That works perfectly well. Wizards. Supposedly, the drow males are the wizards, if you read the stories. They're the ones that learn the magic and have the skill for magic, whereas females supposedly don't. And this is a generalization of the species. There's no reason you can't be a male drow cleric. There's no reason you can't be a female drow wizard. Particularly if you're an outcast, it's far more likely that you won't fit naturally into drow society. But drow society tends to lean towards female wizards. Tends to lean towards male wizards and female clerics. When it comes to wood elves and high elves, they have no preference. There's plenty of wizards on both genders, so it doesn't make a difference. Obviously, a wizard's spell casting ability is intelligence, ironically, because wizard means wise one. But their spell casting, their spell casting ability is intelligence, meaning that rules-wise, high elves make great wizards. Background-wise, wizards are all about years and years of studying and learning. All elves live for a long time, therefore the years of studying and learning are cool. Worth noting, drow live slightly shorter than the rest of the elves. And the idea of particularly a high elf just locking himself away in a tower and spending all that time studying is again particularly cool. So there we go, and that's all the species. Sorry if I sped through there. I actually got a little counter just there on the bottom of my camera, which tells me how much memory I've got left, and I can see it again towards the end. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Thank you very much. See you next time. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that video, and if you did, remember to like and subscribe to my channel. I'm also on Facebook and Twitter. Not sure why, but I am. So if you like it, see me there, and please tell your friends. Thanks very much. Bye.